Welcome to the second episode of Work-Life Balance. I'm your host Jess, and today I had planned on talking about commuting. But first I want to talk a little bit about job rejection, mainly because it's something I have struggled with over the past year. A lot of you may have not, for anyone who's listening and knows me, I have been trying to look for another job outside of the NHS and nursing. There's various reasons for that, but at the moment I will talk about that in a different episode. But it has been incredibly challenging to try and find another job in this climate. I will talk a little bit about commuting a bit later on, but to start off with, I started interviewing for different jobs while I was about 30 weeks pregnant or thereabout. I decided I wanted to look for something a bit more creative, perhaps something in marketing. I'd done a couple of little courses, a skills boot camp, and so far it's been a wall of rejection. Particularly, I find it really disheartening to get email after email saying, you have been unsuccessful for this and that. Please do apply for future vacancies. And I know I'm not the only one. There's plenty of people out there who are facing job rejection on a daily basis. I just thought I'd like to talk about it just because, it is disheartening, and I think it's good to hear other people's stories about, rejection. We all celebrate successes, but at the same time, there's probably people in the background who are equally demoralised because they have been rejected from a job a lot. And I'm really pleased for people who manage to land a role, particularly if it's their dream role. But for a lot of us out there, we're applying for jobs because we want to survive, and surviving at the moment is really difficult. And as I'm delving further into this podcast world and into using social media, I'm seeing quite a lot of people out there who are hustling. That hustling sounds like a really bad word, but are basically trying to leverage social media just to try and get a little bit of an income. Times are really, really tough. And although I would like to leave nursing behind, I think it's difficult for me to say that I can categorically put it in the past, because it is a security for me. It provides money, it provides an income, and it's not to say that I didn't once love it. I really did love it, but the way things have become within nursing, it's become really difficult for me to remain in it. But at the same time, I see nowhere else that I can go. So, so my first job rejection wasn't really a rejection. I went to an interview day, and afterwards they said I performed really well. However, the role they want me for was not it. They didn't have the role at that time that they wanted me for, and so they would get back to me, and I never heard back. And that was the first instance I had of being ghosted in a job, because all my jobs have been NHS jobs. There's always a clear path of whether you've been accepted for the job, whether you are going to get interviewed, or whether you've been unsuccessful. So that was a real shock to me, and I spoke to my husband about it, and he said, oh yeah, that happens all the time, because he works in IT. So he is used to having this experience, but for me it was really quite I got taken aback. I can't even describe the feelings of that. And I try not to take these things so personally, but I'm so self-driven, I'm so determined, and I know that any job I went into, I would be 100%, and I would be an amazing employee. And I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I know that I'm really hardworking and dedicated, and I'm always invested in learning my skills. But the very fact that I had all this experience from, okay, the job wasn't the same as a nursing job. It was a completely different job. It was more to do with media, marketing and creativity. But I thought, I have all these skills. I've been out there helping to save people's lives. I've been holding people's hands as they've been near the end of their life, or reassuring people and giving drugs that are really, quite potent if you're not careful with them. And I've been rejected for a job that is paying not even half of what I've been earning. And I just couldn't get my head around it. But I again, it's one of these things it wasn't even a rejection, actually. It was just not even hearing back. And I did follow it up with an email, but again, I never heard back. And so that was really, really, really challenging for me. And that was when I was about 30 weeks pregnant. I thought, and I know you don't want to think the worst of employers, but you think, is it because I'm pregnant? Is it because I might ask for flexible working requirements? And all these questions are going through your head. But I had to move forward with that, because I was about to have a beautiful little girl that came into my life, and my sole focus should have been that. But the whole entire time I've been worrying about job hunting, and mainly because when I came to the end of my maternity leave, I wanted to start afresh into something new. As I've already forementioned, for some of the several reasons to do with nursing and the NHS. And I haven't been able to do that. And, I've enjoyed my maternity leave, as difficult as it has been at times and challenging to have a newborn and then a baby that's, very energetic and quite excited. But I've also had this shadow in the background of trying to find another job, and I've done a couple of boot camps, received some certifications, and really worked hard to try and do something within marketing. And I've applied for so many jobs. I've redone my CV several times. I've had people put input into my CV. I've had individuals who've helped me coach me through careers or try to find jobs for me. And admittedly, I live in quite a rural area and transport links aren't the best, which is something I'll come on to again in a bit about when I talk about commuting. And then added to that is the fact that I always have a mind for wanting to keep a work-life balance. And now that I actually have a child, I understand a lot more about the difficulties of trying to get things done around childcare. And I actually, as I've already discussed in the previous episode, didn't want to go back to full-time working, because nothing is going to get done if I go back to full-time work. And I don't need full-time work. I just need something that will bring a small amount of extra income into the house. So when I was looking for jobs over the past year, the majority of jobs I was looking at, particularly within marketing, were asking for full-time employees. And I have had a couple of interviews, and I understand if they have advertised full-time that, that's what they want. So they don't have to give you a reduced hours or consider you for reduced hours. But the amount of jobs that are asking for full-time employees with little to no flexibility, or if you even try to open a conversation about it, you're shut down really quickly. So some of my conversations have gone, I'm happy to consider full-time, but would the particular employer consider part-time hours? And by part-time hours, I mean 30 hours, not 37 and a half, 30. And in fact, actually, the majority of the contracts out there I've been finding are actually 40 hours. And one job I interviewed for was looking more like a 45-hour job because of the amount of... let me start again. was looking like 45 hours because actually you get an hour break, and then you have the 40 hours is actually the contracted hours. I wasn't clear whether the hour was paid or not, but I can't, in my life, and this is why I'm starting this work-life balance podcast, I need a level where I can have some time at home and spend some time with my child. And I know a lot of people, and if you're listening out there, you may have your child in full-time childcare, but for me, that doesn't fit my life at the moment. I would prefer to have some more time with my child at home and work part-time. I would like to have something, but I don't want them to be in childcare, for the majority of the week, and then I only get to see them fleetingly at the weekend. Because in my mind, I've had a child so that I can be there for them and, still spend most of my time with them, because otherwise they're spending half their time with a childminder. And I get it. A lot of people don't have that choice. They have to go out and work full time to bring money in. But I do have that choice, and I want to have time with my child, and that means only doing part-time work. But that has been really difficult to actually find. So if you do a quick search on Indeed or on any other platform and try to find part-time work, it is far and few between, especially in certain fields. And I have found, I suppose the one good thing about the NHS is they are probably pretty accommodating with trying to have part-time work, more flexibility in your working hours / pattern. Now, I know that's not true for everyone. A lot of people that I've seen on different forums or spoken to throughout my nursing and NHS career have struggled with trying to get flexibility and part-time work. But I think a lot of that, and I could be wrong, please do comment or email me, message me your thoughts if you have had any struggles. I'd love to discuss it more, and if you'd like to come on the podcast and talk about your struggles with trying to get part-time or flexible work, I'm more than happy to discuss that. But the majority of the time, it has been a lot easier to try and attain part-time work or flexibility at the NHS and a nursing career than it has in any of the other jobs I've been searching for in the past year. So, again, if any of you guys have had some thoughts around part-time work, flexibility, I would love to hear them. So, the crux of it is I was rejected for another job today. So, it's been a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and I did have my hopes up because the employer were they were talking about the benefits they had, and they were really putting out the benefits of flexibility, accommodating of part-time work, remote work, and that seemed great. That seemed perfect, and to receive that rejection was quite it was quite hard to swallow, because I've been really trying to find something different, and I have actually almost fallen into a couple scams. I've been that desperate. I've had a couple of people, they messaged me and it seemed like the message wasn't very genuine. So for those of you who are really trying to find a job, keep persevering. Again, message me, love to hear your thoughts, get a conversation going about job searching. It would be really great to hear other people's stories, and I'm happy to talk about them on this podcast. And if you'd like to come on and talk about your views, that would be great. So yeah, and I think that's on top of some of the difficulties around parenthood as well. So alongside these influxes of job rejections, I have been navigating, obviously, being a first-time parent, and I think, again, the other issue I'm having is often being quite overstimulated or feeling quite run down. So a lot of the things I'm having to do it's looking at things at a totally different new light, which is why I talk about work-life balance a lot. And just trying to clean around the house, and also watch your little one, who at the moment, my little girl, she's at the stage where she's crawling everywhere, and I mean, I have to have eyes on her every 2 seconds to stop her basically trying to kill herself every 2 seconds, but also allow her the freedom to be able to explore the world around her. So that's been quite challenging. And then also at the same time this morning, I was trying to pump some breast milk in order for her to go to the childminder 5 hours a week, because I decided to put her into even though I haven't started work again, I've decided to get childminder for 5 hours a week, just to be able to give myself space to clean the house, have a little bit of respite, because my little girl, bless her, she is one of the most energetic kids I have ever seen in my life. And I'm not just saying that because she's my child, but if anyone has ever met me, I have a lot of energy, and my mother has said to me that I was exactly the same. And, well, let's put it this way, my little girl has thrown wake windows out of the window, literally. She has moved ahead in her milestones quite quickly, and whereas a lot of people would say, oh, that's really great, they're hitting their milestones, I'm a bit sort of worn out from her jumping from one to the other, and so I've become quite exhausted quite quickly, alongside the fact that I'm really trying to make strides in having this podcast, and trying to put out a couple of posts on social media. And my aim here is not to have some great following or have the best Instagram account in the world. My aim is just to have real conversations with people. Doesn't matter if you're from the other side of the world. In fact, that would be even better. Not better. I'd love to hear from different perspectives of how people are managing work-life balances across not just the UK, but in the world. I really want to have more conversations about it, because I think, especially in this current climate, it seems that everyone is fighting, literally more than we were fighting years ago, and it just seems to be a never-ending battle against everything. So if you've changed jobs, or you've tried to attain part-time work, has it been easy, and how have you managed to do that? So I've talked a little bit about job rejection and some of the challenges I've had to overcome as a mother on a day-to-day basis. Bit heartfelt today, but I'm going to talk a little bit about commuting now, and a little bit about parking. And the reason I want to talk a little bit about commuting is I think it's really important. It's a really important factor when you're considering a work-life balance, and particularly any future jobs that you may have. And I say that because commuting can take a huge chunk out of your day. And I was thinking about this. I think there's 3 major things to consider when you're thinking about commuting to work. So a little bit about background before I start about my commuting journey is I have always lived quite rurally, with some travel into major cities nearby. But the difficulty with rural travel is that, well, I've not lived in a city, so I can only attest to some of the city infrastructures I've seen from going into a city to work. But I imagine in London the transport links are a lot more better, or hugely better. And I know from talking to certain other people that a lot of people don't even have a car, or don't learn to drive if you're in London, because you just simply don't need to, and the transport links are good enough. Whereas if you're living rurally, there's no chance you can survive or get anywhere without a car. So where I live, there's one bus, it looks like 1 or 2 buses a day that goes through, and probably starts at 10 o'clock, and the last bus coming back is at 4 o'clock, which is never going to work for getting to work at all. So And also, additionally, if you wanted to instead take a taxi, that would just cost a huge amount of money every day. But so yeah, my commuting journey has mainly been through rural areas, probably transferring into a city town area. I have done commutes that have been anywhere from between 30 minutes to 2.5 hours. I got to the point of doing 2.5 hours because that was for I did that for career progression and to go into a role that I really wanted to. So I ended up staying in hotels for the duration and then coming back at the end of my shift pattern. But the problem I now consider is when you have the first thing I would consider when commuting is the length of commute, because essentially, unless you're one of those lucky people who works for, I don't know, a really big company and you're probably a director or a chief executive, you're not getting paid for that commute, but that is still part of, I consider it part of your working day. So if you say have a 10-hour shift and your commute is an hour long either way, that essentially becomes a 12-hour shift, or I feel like it becomes a 12-hour shift, and it takes out hours that you could be at home. So it's one thing I would really seriously consider if I was to commute again. And I had a little post out that I put out on one of the forums I'm in, and the majority of people had said that I think any commutes over an hour had basically killed them, and the stress of it was not worth it. They ended up packing that job in. And I remember going back to job applications that I tried to apply for an apprenticeship role, and I was rejected for an apprenticeship role based on the fact that the commute would be too long and I would most likely drop out of the apprenticeship before too long. So even employers are, I think, when they're reviewing applications and having a look at the location that you're travelling from, are considering how long you're going to commute and whether that's going to be sustainable for you, or are you just going to drop out the job very quickly. So the length of commute, I think, has a huge factor. And I recently, prior to having my little one, was commuting over an hour and then was doing a 13-hour shift. And yes, admittedly, this was why I was pregnant. So I was absolutely exhausted and ended up taking maternity leave early. But even now, I think about before I was pregnant, how I was doing that. So then that ended up being a 15-hour day and I was absolutely shattered. And it didn't just impact on the amount of time I had at home, but it impacted on my overall general health. Even if I wasn't pregnant, my actual health was not great. I didn't have quality sleep. I'd be sleeping for days on end afterwards. I spent my whole life in bed basically. My skin was awful. My eyesight was starting to really struggle because a lot of my travelling was actually in the dark. And when you're focusing in the dark for over an hour on a road, and especially in the poor conditions in the winter, it was absolutely horrific. And so I thought to myself that this is really not worth it anymore. The second thing I would consider is the conditions of your commute. Now, I do think that traffic is getting a lot worse as the population in the country is getting larger and larger. Traffic conditions are getting even worse. And if you think about even trying to rely on the public transport, and again, the links are probably a lot better in cities like London, but public transport in rural areas is just abysmal. Buses don't turn up, trains are cancelled, and yeah, obviously for people who have been commuting over the train strikes, again, that's it, probably been even harder. I can understand why they've been striking, but it's again another inconvenience as to what would add to your already stressful day if you've got quite a challenging job. So yeah, that's another thing I would consider. And I think I've already put a clip about this, but I did have a instance where I was travelling back. Well, I was a lot younger and probably a lot more naive, and I was travelling back from work, and I was going to get the last bus that was going home. It was not the smartest idea. and it was cancelled, and so I was stuck at a bus station with no way of getting home. My husband didn't drive at the time, and none of my relatives were available to pick me up. And so there were 3 other guys there. I think they had just finished from a factory, and they were going in the same direction as I was, and we decided to share the cost of a taxi back to the same area. Yes, I understand that's probably not the safest thing I've done when I think about sort of my own personal safety, but at that time I didn't think about it. I just wanted to get home. I was quite exhausted, and I just thought actually it's going to be cheaper for me, because I wasn't on a lot of money then either. I was still working at a very junior level in my career, and so I was saving every little bit of money that I could. And this is the reality that I probably assume a lot of people are facing, especially if you're on a low income, is, facing that choice of, do I share a taxi with 3 strangers to reduce the cost so that I can get home, because things are so expensive. So considering conditions, I mean, the other factor is, would you prefer to do a drive in your own vehicle, probably with the comfort of, you may have heated seats or your own music that you're able to put quite loudly on, or would you prefer to have a commute where you're on a train or a bus and you can do other bits on your phone, but that might take longer, you don't have any way of stopping for the toilet or getting snacks, etc. So there's also so many considerations around commuting. And then the third thing, as I've already vaguely alluded to in my little story, is about the expense of commuting. Now that has gone up tenfold, because I know the cost of train tickets have gone up. I haven't recently myself taken the train, but I was a year or 2 ago taking the train on a regular basis, and I was finding that often you're buying these quite expensive tickets at times and then being rammed into a carriage full of people pressed against them. And I remember this was straight after COVID, and I was thinking, wow, this it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because the virus sort of was still pretty much unknown, and things had opened up again, and people were ramming together onto this train, and for some reason they hadn't put on any more carriages between these 2 locations that I was travelling. And I was paying a fortune in tickets, because I was trying to reduce the amount of mileage on my car, and also because, as I have said earlier, trying to concentrate on the road when you're travelling over an hour can be quite difficult in poor conditions. I could do some reading, I can do a little bit more on my phone, whereas if I was driving I couldn't do that. Although when I'm driving I've listened to some really fantastic podcasts, so that has been nice. But the expense as well you have to think that the expense is not just limited to that one ticket that you purchase or £30 of fuel that you purchase, and in recent times fuel has been quite expensive. But it's also thinking about, if you have a car, you've got to ensure that, you've got to tax that. And if you're having to commute, that might mean that if there's 2 of you commuting, you might need 2 cars, or you might need to spend an extra hour on childcare so that you can factor in the fact that you have to get back from work to be able to pick your child up. And then that all adds up. So that's why I really wanted to think about commuting when you're thinking about a work, a life, and a balance between all of it. I was going to talk a little bit about parking, mainly because part of my commuting journey has been thinking about parking. And often I think a lot of people have been surprised by the fact that as a nurse working for the NHS, the majority of us have had to pay for parking. And it has been quite expensive at times. And then that's an additional cost that you have to add if you're thinking about your commuting journey. And then I have had so many instances quite frequently of circling a car park for quite a bit of time, which has then made me late for work. And so it's added to my commute. And often you then have to think, is this really worth it? The stress of half an hour, which then becomes an hour because you're trying to find parking that you've paid for, as to whether that's really, what you want from life. And again, as I said earlier, it's not everyone has the choice. A job is a job. As I'm finding out, trying to switch careers has not been really easy. But again, if you don't try, you'll never know. So I thought I'd take this year to try and find a different job. And again, I think employers are now potentially not so keen on doing remote work. They're trying to get everyone back in the office, but I don't think that's such a good thing. I know a lot of people do miss being in the office for some of the social reasons, for aspects of communication, and not everyone has the choice at working from home. Obviously, I can't be a nurse from home, except if I'm doing some non-clinical work. But in other jobs, I think trying to open up to remote would be really helpful, because I think it would do a lot for employees' health, welfare and benefits if they're able to do that. But anyway, they are my thoughts on work-life balance. I've talked about some job rejection, commuting, and a little bit about parking. Again, if you're listening to my podcast, I would really love to hear your thoughts on things. Message me on Facebook, Instagram, follow me if you can, because I'm going to be trying to do another podcast talking about more of these important work-life balance issues. And I just want to thank you all for listening.